Hi, this is Robert Clinky-Beard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. Really excited to spend the next 30 minutes with you and really find out what ways in which we can improve your business. If you go away with 1-2 improvements to your business on a weekly basis, that makes significant progress over the year. We really hope you enjoy the shows. I encourage you to like and share with your friends, your network, your family members. Based on my book, The Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs, I want to pull out some type of content, some type of nugget every single week, meeting a guest, and that helps you develop your business and become more profitable. So check out the Wilson 360 website, look at some of the coaching programs, look at some of the training courses, click on those links, figure out how can we help you. We have now 14 people on the team that can come and help your business. So cheers everyone, have an awesome day. Hi, this is Robert Clinky-Beard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. Really excited today to be joined from over the pond. Colin Reader, thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks, Robert, for inviting me. Nice to be on it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for you to be on. Nice to see a friendly accent. So, Colin, tell our audience.
South of the border, though, Robert. South of the border.
I know. Well, I'll let you off for that. I'll let you off for that. There's a whole history there for our audience who don't know. Yeah, just watch. What would be a good movie for people to watch, Colin?
Oh, I don't know. You better pick it. You've had more action up there than we've had down here, I think.
Well, I mean, Braveheart's probably a good one to start with. I think most people are familiar with that. But anyway, Colin, tell the audience a little bit about your background, just so that people understand who you are and where you are in the world.
Sure. So I'm from England. I am based in East Sussex, which is the southeast of England. I've got a company called Wildflower Lawns and Meadows. I specialise in creating wildflower meadows. And that came about really from a childhood in the countryside. I grew up in a rural area next to a farm, spent most of my childhood on a farm. It was a dairy farm, so basically monoculture grass, which is obviously what most dairy farms are. But I'd always had an interest in the kind of meadow landscapes and everything like that. I went to agricultural college, but studied a kind of rural resource management rather than agriculture straight. Then got into conservation. I worked for the County Wildlife Trust, and then sort of moved into doing a variety of things, really, sort of countryside based, until I hooked up with an old college friend. He was in forestry, I was into conservation, and he tragically lost his wife, and he was struggling with his work, and so I joined him to help him with his sort of biodiversity aspects of his work. We had to do reports and all that kind of thing. And we happened to get a job at a large estate, a rural estate, for a philanthropic owner who was very keen to turn a dairy farm back to a landscape that's really good for wildlife. So she had great vision, and as part of that, she allowed me to experiment on the best way to create wildflower meadows. Back in the late 90s, there was a lot of misinformation out there. The only information out there was work that the government had done over here through the agriculture department on how to create wildflower meadows. And the view was that the land had to be very, very infertile, really had very low fertility to be worthwhile trying to create a wildflower meadow. And back then there were some grants becoming available, so subsidies to create wildflower areas. So there was encouragement for farmers to try and put some habitat back into the landscape, which was really good. But the reason that the organisation said that it's got to be really fertile soil is because how they did their test plots, and how they did it was basically they just strongly harrowed, scarified, if you get me, existing grassland with like strong harrows and stuff like that, and then sowed the seed on. Of course, what happened is the existing sward, the grass, whatever, still had its full root system, so it grew back strongly. And the only areas that allowed germination of the sown wildflower seeds were the ones that were very poor in soil, because that meant the grass grew back very slowly from being harrowed strongly and ripped about. And it had time for the light and the warmth to hit the seed and to germinate it. And so then that got written into the report and broadcast nationally on this is how, this is the only way you can do a wildflower meadow if you've got a very low fertility index in your soil. And then so I basically started setting about how to overcome that. I knew that couldn't be the only way you could restore the land, because most of the land had been improved and the fertility had been raised and everything like that. And I soon worked out that it was down to preparation. You shouldn't just be looking at harrowing, scarifying and harrowing and chucking seed on, walking away. That's not a very efficient and good practice in order to create a wildflower meadow.
Where does most of the demand come from Is it come from, estate holders? Is it from local authorities? Is it, from landscapes, which I suppose stems from potentially architects or something? So where do you see most of that demand coming from?
Basically all of those now. The wildflower, the rewilding, which is the new buzz term over here, but is a big movement now, but it's basically putting back some wildlife habitat. And that's important even in planning decisions now. So yes, I get a lot of calls from architects. Most of my client base, I would say, is just members of the public. They're the ones who go on my website and they buy my seeds or maybe my wildflower turf and things like that. So I'd say 75% is probably just general retail, as you call it. So customers of all sizes. And then, yeah, sure, there are some larger landowners who want to do bigger scale works. And the meadows we create personally, we can't take our machinery too far. So we'll only go within the county, so East Sussex where I am, and a bit further out into the neighbouring counties, or it just is uneconomic to take the machinery because of the prep works, because we have to do various site visits. So outside of that, I'll do the actual consultancy. I'll go there, I'll instruct the contractors or whatever, or the owner on how to go about it. But otherwise, we work for the national parks, various conservation organisations, county councils. So really across the board now. Across the board. And it's just been growing. I'd say architects have now moved into it more because they're speccing a lot of this kind of wildflower area within new building developments and stuff like that. That's probably the biggest growing thing at the moment.
And I might be maybe sheltered from this, but I'm not aware of the demand or the buzz terms of the use of wildflower meadows across here in the States. Why do you think that is? You think it's just people just haven't gotten onto it yet? Or
yeah, I'm not sure. I did a show. When I get time to do some shows, I did a show called the BBC Countryfile Show, which is a large outdoor show with a lot of people presenting what they do and all this kind of stuff. A friend of mine was helping at the stall, and she brought her friend, who was an American, and she was saying that her friends, a lot of her friends know Gardener's World. They watch the BBC programme Gardener's World, and it was, I think, run by Monty Don then. Okay. And she said, a lot of people follow that in America, but there's not a huge supply of you don't apparently have the same scale of garden centres we have over here. So garden centres over here, you drive in and they have, thousands of plants available. They have everything for your garden, for creating it. And there's a garden centre every, so many miles, generally in the more built up areas. It's a very, very big thing over here. But in America, the only contacts we've had, I've been asked on various occasions for certain seeds and things like that for America, but I fight shy, to be fair, of sending stuff to America. One, it's awkward just to get it there, but two, I'm also aware of introducing genetic strains that aren't suitable for America, so I prefer everything to be kept integral to American flora, fauna, keep their genetic strength and everything like that, and not kind of mix it. But there has been inquiries about creating wildflower turf over there. I know that some companies would like to create wildflower turf because that's the landscaper's dream, in that's like your lawn turf, your grass turf, but it's a mini wildflower meadow already sown. So you lay it out like carpet, well rooted, put it down, water it and walk away, basically, and job done. For a landscaper, that's ideal because they don't have to go back to site as long as the owner's going to water it if it's a dry, dry period for a little while. But that's so much easier than creating from seed, which is definitely technically harder because there are far more challenges you'll face when creating from seed than if you're using wildflower turf.
All right. Yeah. No, I'm definitely not aware of having that sort of a seeded lawn. The sod, definitely not aware of that. Garden centres, yeah, we do have some, but they're definitely not as prevalent and large scale compared to the UK. I used to work in quite a few of them. You get some occasionally over here, but definitely not to the same scale as back in the UK. So
why do you think that is, Robert? What's your view, living in America? Why is that?
Good question. I think a lot of it comes to demand. Certainly, the landscape companies I deal with, a lot of them deal with the residential side of things, but I think they definitely like more of the groomed look. There is some landscape companies I deal with that deal with more of that estate management, and they're definitely getting to more of that sustainable environment, but I haven't heard of the wildflower element of it, and that just might be me not asking the right questions, but I just don't know if it's top of people's mind. But
is there concern? Is there concern over there for loss of species of the wildflower species and associated wildlife and stuff like that, or is it because you've got such an amazing, huge national parks that kind of offsets, and so there's not really a concern?
Yeah, good question. Certainly I would say there's obviously a lot more land, a lot more space, a lot more parks over here, so that might be part of it. And I think when it comes to their own landscape, their own garden, they like more of that sort of groomed, nice and tidy look per se. But I might be wrong. Maybe
that's interesting, because I was in Ireland a little while ago, and that's very similar over there. It's groomed, well-groomed lawns and stuff like that. I didn't see much in the way of flower beds and the kind of stuff that goes on over here, which was interesting. So you're not alone on that one then.
Yeah, and there might be obviously such a vast place over here, and there might be parts of the country I haven't been exposed to, or maybe this is going to cause a nice little messaging system where people are asking about this. So I just thought it'd be a good point to bring up in the podcast to see if we can get a discussion, and maybe we'll create some demand, or maybe there's a whole subculture out there that I'm not aware of, and I'm going to get slammed. So it'll be interesting to see people's reactions. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, offline you were just talking about the seed part, how there's definitely some education or learning needed there. Love to just hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The common way that people will create a wildflower meadow, they will go into the area, say it's a field, and they'll rotivate it. They may spray off the existing grass first, they may not, and then they'll rotivate it. They'll chuck on the wildflower seed and walk away. I think that's the job done. And unfortunately, the big thing that they've forgotten about is the weed seed bank. So within all soil, you've got historic seed bank where plants, whatever it's been, particularly if it's been left unmanaged for a while, which is often the case over here when someone wants a wildflower meadow. Take the scenario of someone's got a house. They've got children who've moved from college and now maybe left home. They did have, for instance, a horse or something in a paddock at the back, and that's now gone. And that meadow's been left. That field's been left for a couple of years. It's growing, long grass that's seeding. Maybe other weeds are getting in there, and they're seeding, dropping in onto the soil, onto the soil surface. And so once you rotivate, you're going to expose those to light, and also things historically that have been in the soil. So the history of that field will be revealed through its seed bank. And so that will germinate. Now, normally, unfortunately, it's what we call weeds that germinate strongly, because they're the colonizers. They're the things that we call them weed because they dominate. They're brutish. Like over here, we have dock, which is very common and can have a big leaf area, and it can touch canopy, if you like, on the micro level, in that leaf to leaf will touch. So you've got nothing but dock over a large area, no light hitting the soil underneath. So if you're sown wildflower seed, that seed will not germinate. It's just totally covered by, it won't get the light to trigger it, or if they start to germinate, it'll die. So the weed seed bank is the biggest thing to respect. And so I've been called into sites that have been seeded but been an absolute mess, where you've got some wildflowers growing short, but towering above them, you've got all kinds of weeds that visually look pretty horrific, and also are basically out competing the wildflowers. So that's one important thing, to respect the weed seed bank. So that means that someone who goes in to do a wildflower meadow can't go in the once. How we create a wildflower meadow is a little bit different. One, we don't cultivate the ground unless we have to. The only time we cultivate the ground is if it's compacted. So if we've called into to building sites where they've been tracking over ground a lot. If it's a field, let's say a grass field, we'll kill off the existing sward, and then we'll scalp it with a flail collector mower. So a flail mower, so the blades go down, not rotary, collect the cuttings, and we buzz it right down to the ground, the kind of thing golf courses use. And we can reveal the soil surface that way. And the reason we don't like to cultivate the soil is that the soil structure itself, if it's been a field for decades or even longer, it could have been a field that's haven't been cultivated for centuries sometimes. Certainly over here, the structure that's built up takes a long, long time to get back together to what it is. You've got an incredible system underground of fungi, mycorrhiza, obviously root structures and all the things that contribute, all the little microbes and everything like that. Earthworms too do a great job. And that's a very, very, it's like an ancient woodland, if you like, turned on its head underground. And we respect that. And we find that things grow so well if you haven't destroyed that structure. Because once you've cultivated an area, as you'll know, the soil's loose and you've lost all structure. And the soil can also cap. If it's a clay soil, it'll form a cap, a little hard surface. And so that can make growth harder and things like that. Our ideal way, and we do 90% of the time, is, as I say, kill off the existing sward, scalp it, clear away the cuttings, leave it, wait for the weed seeds on the surface to start to germinate, and then we'll knock them out. We'll spray them off with Roundup, because that's the only chemical that we can use that we consider safe, in that it doesn't affect any following on germination. Anything that germinates the next day will not be killed. So it's not residual in that way, it breaks down. So it's not a chemical like a lot of others out there that would be nasty and just stay in the soil and affect germination in that way. Now, to pull away from using weed killer, any weed killer, people have tried flamethrowers, things like that. But if you think the devastation of flamethrowers, they burn, they incinerate everything on the soil surface. So glyphosate Roundup isn't an insecticide, it's a herbicide. And so I've created Meadows with a one spray glyphosate, or no, several maybe, and then seeded it, that was a grass monoculture and now has several what we call red data book species, which are nationally endangered species, now hosted within that site. So it's a very important site in southeast England. And so it shows the benefit that we've accrued rather than any negatives from that. Because I know there's sometimes some backlash of talking about Roundup or whatever, but until they bring out anything that would do the same job when you're talking large scale, there's no alternative. But the worst thing about it is it's been used wrongly in the past. That's why it's got a bad name. It was used, as I understand it, to dry off wheat, for consumption, because it's a salt, basically a salt-based product, which is not what it's meant to be used for. Then it gets in the food chain. This isn't for that. This is for just killing the grass off. We remove the grass, reveal the soil surface, that's fine. And then say, as the weeds germinate, we'll probably go in 5 times over a year to knock them out before we seed. So if we take on a field in May one year, so that's sort of early summer, midsummer, May, June, we will get that bare as soon as we can by doing that, killing off the grass. A couple of weeks later, scalp it, remove the cuttings, and then we'll wait maybe 6 weeks later. The weeds will have germinated to a size where it's economic to go in and spray them, which will probably be about 3 inches wide, 3 inches high, something like that. And at that size, you don't have to do any more cut and clearing because it's a salt-based herbicide. It'll desiccate, which is great. That's what you want. The idea is to keep the light hitting the soil surface to trigger more weed seeds. You've got to try and exhaust the surface weed seeds, okay? And that's the way we do it. And then the following April, we'll go and we'll seed it. So we haven't disturbed the ground in that way. And we've still got the structure. You don't have erosion from runoff in the same way because you've got all the root structure of the previous soil still holding it. So that's the ideal way of doing it. Now, one pitfall that I've had a lot of customers contact me about, they tell me, oh yeah, we've prepared a little area in our back garden for wildflower seeding. We've covered it with carpet, so we don't have to use any herbicide to kill the grass, which is fine. But then they've kept it down until they seed it. And so what they've forgotten about is when they reveal that carpet and then the light hits the soil, you're going to stimulate the weed seed bank again. So if they do that, they've basically got to do that repeatedly. Get rid of the carpet, let the light hit the weed seeds, let them germinate, put the carpet back, etc., etc. So it's a more long-winded process that a lot of people wouldn't want to do. But just to cover it up, to kill the grass and then think you can seed it, it doesn't do anything about dealing with the weed seed bank. So that's the biggest thing that I try to educate people about, is to respect the weed seed bank. Some areas are really bad and some aren't that bad with the weed seeds. And sometimes you use it to your advantage. We've done sites where historically it used to be a very rich wildflower area. I mean, we work for national parks and people like that, reinstating what's called sites of special scientific interest and things like that. And so there, what we've done in one site, we'd actually deep plowed. So we basically went back in time and we brought up the seed bank from decades ago. And in doing that, we managed to bring back orchids and wild orchids and things like that into the meadow, which we knew were there, maybe 50 years ago, but had been lost just through management, basically lack of management. So there's times when you can use the weed seed or the seed bank, not all weed seed bank, the seed bank to your advantage. But in most cases, on land that's been farmed and hasn't got historic to wildflower interest, certainly not in recent times. Yeah, it's different kettle of fish.
Is there any sort of ongoing maintenance? I'm partly asking that question because certainly no parts of the country where water resources are getting more challenging and people can maybe converting grass areas into xeriscape type environments. And I'm just wondering if, the potentially moving to like some type of a wildflower meadow or environment is, potentially an alternative to that, or whether that's still needs some type of ongoing water or maintenance.
Well, yeah, no, interestingly, we've had quite a few droughts over here as well in the past few years. What happens is the grass lawns will go yellow and die away. But the wildflowers within the lawn, if we create like a wildflower lawn, the wildflowers don't. So they are far more drought tolerant than grasses. Very rare for a wildflower to die in a drought, to be honest with you. Even over here, if we've done like meadows, we've sown meadows and then we've had a drought so if we sowed it in April, I'd expect the meadow to be doing stuff from, June kind of onwards. If there's some annuals in it, certainly. If it's only purely perennials, mid-June onwards. And so that can be an issue if you have a drought and the seed just sits there and it's not going to germinate. Or if it has started germinating, you think, oh, crumbs, are just going to die. But actually what happened was any little things that germinated lived off the dew and just stopped growing and stayed there. But basically, the seed is absolutely fine. And we've had spring meadows suddenly appear in late summer because it just waited until the rains came and off it goes. It's a bit like in the desert when you have these amazing flushes of paint and it turns the colour. And those seeds are put up with all the harsh hots and colds and everything. The seeds are amazing. I mean, behind me, I have a microscope and I check all my seeds when I'm doing my mixing of all different species to create my bespoke mixes that I do. And if anyone grabs any seed of any sort, certainly a wildflower seed, pop it under a microscope. It's absolutely beautiful. The design and structure, they're all different. It's quite amazing. Me and my colleague, we always have fun sometimes, just picking a seed random. If you find something, put it under a microscope and name it. It's like a forensic stuff. And after a while, you can name the plant from the seed. It's kind of cool. If only there's a detective job like that, I'll be well up for it. So they are amazing structures, wildflower seeds. They're incredible designs. Why they're so incredible makes you think.
If I know we're getting close to wrap up time here, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, to learn a little bit more about what the services you offer, or even just basics, understanding how to start from scratch and in developing a wildflower lawn across here in the US or anywhere? We have a bunch of listeners from all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing to do is go on my website, which is called wildflowerlawnsandmeadows.com. And then on there, I've got quite a lot of information, a lot of instruction sheets and things like that on how to create wildflower meadows. If you look at any of my seed mixes, there's an instruction sheet linked to it. The only difference between, the majority of people are buying, doing small areas, 10 square meters, 50 square meters, stuff like that. When you're talking an acre or more, or a hectare, then you've got to take into account the scale of the weed situation. So that thing I told you about leaving the area bare for a year is what you should do if you've got like an acre or 2 acres, a hectare. If you've got a tiny patch, you can hand weed it. It's not so bad. You don't have to leave it bare a year. So I wouldn't expect that. But there are other options, of course, that people can be aware of. You don't have to destroy your existing lawn. Over here, certainly, because we have these products. You can put in plant plugs, which are little pre-germinated plants. You just pop into a lawn, a bit like you put bulbs in. You just pop these little plant plugs in your existing lawn. And you don't need to make the lawn bare or anything like that. Or if you want even more established plants, you put in the mature plants, which are in 9-centimeter pots. Pop them straight in the lawn. So that's another great way for people with small back gardens to add wildflowers without having to turn it back to soil or killing off the grass or removing the grass or anything. So you'll see those on my website too. And again, instruction sheets to it. So, there may be, hopefully in time, places setting those up in America, but by all means, look at my instruction sheets and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I can't ship to America. We can only stay within the UK. But yeah, my website's the best way to find out more information, and my email is on there and things like that.
Colin, really thank you for coming on the show today. Really appreciate you helping to educate some of the audience here, and potentially, maybe there's a few more wildflower lawns that might pop up somewhere around the world after listening to the show today.
Lovely. Well, thanks, Robert. Very good speaking to you.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Thank you very much, Colin. Cheers.
See you then. Bye.
Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today. We've got some great Ironman mindset takeaways for your business and for your leadership role. This is Robert Klinkenbeard, the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. Check us out on all the different podcast channels. Check us out on YouTube. Like, share. Also check out our website, thecommerciallandscaper.com or wilson360.com. Check out some of the digital courses. Check out the book, The Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs. We want to make sure we have a pure, dead, brilliant day. Cheers, everyone.